Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the For the Doers podcast. My name is Seda. I am your host, and today is incredibly special because we are here today not only with our regular guest, Janice Sadoyama, our brand pro. We also have my friend, Julia Nettles Bay. Yay, Julia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am so happy to have you because you have been one of our biggest supporters since we started. And of course, being a friend, we have had many conversations. You are definitely a doer. And we've had a lot of conversations about what it is to be a doer. And sometimes the not so happy conversations about, what comes with being a doer and what comes with having a fantastic work ethic and really wanting to do your best and bring the best out in people. And you're a pro at that. And like I said, I'm just happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm happy and a tad nervous, but
don't be scared.
I'm here with you and Janice, who I have to say, never having met you, but I've heard so much about you. It's like, oh my God. There was some episode you were not on, and I said to Seda, I said, where's Janice? And then I had to think to myself, I'm like, the woman has another job, Julia. In real life, she has a job. She can't just be, the person.
Julia, we're friends already. It's already happened. It has already happened.
Janice.
You experienced the magic of Janice.
Is she Seda? You were on the next episode and it was just you and Seda. I was like, okay, all right.
We're good now.
We're good now.
We're good now.
Janice is here.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing ever.
Well, we're going to get right into it because, of course, we were already into it before we started recording. So Julia has chosen to speak about burnout. This is a subject that is near and dear to all of our hearts right now. We are still living through a pandemic, and a lot of us just haven't stopped. And the go is affecting a lot of us. And the reason that I think this conversation will be so great is because, again, I know it's not just us who are speaking right here to burnout. It's reality right now. It's changing our world. But I think our focus is trying to really discuss it so that we can gear ourselves in a positive direction. We spoke about depression last week. That's a reality for me, even though I'm like, woo, Miss Happiness most of the time. Depression is real when you feel like just for me, I can say depression is real when you feel like you're not living your path or your truth sometimes. And that happens to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why these conversations are so important. If we, as I always say, reach just one person, we did our work.
Exactly.
So where should we start on
Well,
this wonderful subject?
I think I'd like to start by saying where I'm at now, because I talk to a lot of friends and family now. People are checking in to say, so how are you? And I'm happy. and I am happy with who I am and where I am right now. And it took a while to get here. The
Mm,
journey was rocky, but I had to go through the journey to get to where I am right now, is the
mhm,
reality of the situation.
mhm,
Um, and I am, as you coin it, a doer, in that I have been going, working, um, and just running. This past 2 years has been like wild and crazy for each and every person. We've all been doing something, and I just pushed myself to the edge. I pushed
yeah,
myself to the point of no return. I was overwhelmed. I was physically and mentally exhausted, and my husband could see it play out and was trying to get me to reel it in.
mm,
But we just had this conversation this weekend, and I said, you know what? I did. I do recall your saying to me, Jules, you need to delegate or you need to not do X, Y, and Z. And I said, you know what? I needed to make my own mistakes. I needed to fail. And that's okay. That's
yep,
okay that I did that, because it, as long as I'm learning from it. And how did I
mhm,
respond to it? And I came out on the other side a better person for it. But as I've been thinking about it, I went out on leave in September. So this is the longest period of time for 30 plus years that I have not
mm,
worked, because I've been working since I was, I don't know, whatever the legal age for working is, I've been working. So, and I worked through school. So I've been working for many years. But when I stopped, literally stopped, and I stopped because I had to. My body, as we come to know, forced me to stop because I had a panic attack.
mhm,
Wasn't sleeping. I slept like 4 to 5 hours a night, and that's been going on for years,
wow,
years, in some way, shape, or form. And I would just roll because I had to, or I thought I had to.
yeah,
Uh,
well,
yeah, that's what it was. I thought I had to, and I would push myself. And as I've been reflecting on it, why did I do that? Well, every time I'm always I'm goal oriented. I'm ambitious,
mhm,
and once I achieve something, it's like, okay, what's next? How do I get to the next ladder, and so on and so forth. Um, but I'm always trying to prove myself. And
mhm.
that's the bottom line. I'm trying to prove myself to that I am enough.
Whew, that was
At the
deep.
end of the day, I was trying to prove that I am enough, that I am worthy of this position. That yes, you did promote me into this position, and I'm here because of XYZ, and I have to prove. I can't let this person down, and what have you. And um, I'm my hardest and harshest critic, but I can tell you when this past year, when others were weighing in and
Hmm.
providing me with saying that I wasn't where I should be, oh, that just brought the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
house down.
Mhm.
Because it's one thing if I'm saying it, but it's another thing if others are saying it. I'm like, holy crap, I've never had this happen before.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my, maybe I'm not enough. I mean, I'm now this is validating all of those little, words, all of those little fears. It's like, oh my, make, wait, how did this happen? How did we get here? I am an overachiever. This has never happened to me before. And after that panic attack, literally my husband was like, enough is enough. This has to stop now. I've been, watching you go through this and do what you do and try and, handle it your way, but you need to stop, because otherwise I thought to myself, I could be in an institution. I could go that route. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, because I've had mental illness in my family. I mean, and I still do. And I've had people who've been in mental hospitals, and it's just like, oh, you need to get it together.
Wow.
And there's no shame in this. There's no shame in taking a step back and saying, okay, I need to breathe. So I did. I went out on leave. I've been seeing a therapist for quite some time anyway, because I knew that I needed help. And I said to myself, okay, you can't do this by yourself any longer. You need some help. So you need to call on some people to do this. So I did that, and went through the course of a couple. I'm on my fourth person right now, because you have to click. The first person I clicked with, who I love, I mean, this woman is no joke, Dr. Isabel Springer, no joke. The woman she's real. She's you can just see the thoughts clicking in her head, and she's just so authentic and so confident in herself. She's very perceptive. I just loved her. Wish I could have stayed with her, but she was out of network, so that's a whole nother topic right there.
Wow.
How we handle all sorts of things, and we could go off on days on that.
Yes.
I definitely see the value in speaking to a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I see the value in it, and because it has helped me. I am back to my old self. Granted, it's been 6 months, but I have taken vacation by myself during this time period, just to sit down somewhere and be quiet. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, so what's next? I'm starting to think about, what am I going to do next professionally? And that's where it gets hazy, for a couple of different reasons. I know what I don't want. And I'm going through the exercise of writing down what brings me joy, what brings me peace, what are my values. I have 3 jobs in mind, only one of which I've actually started interviewing for, or even applied for. The others, I'm like, let's write out the pros and cons for each of these. So I'm being very thoughtful about what's next, but I'm kind of, I'm gun shy. I'm fearful about what is the next step, because I've got to set up some boundaries for myself.
Yeah.
Because that was my problem. That was the other problem. I didn't set up any boundaries.
Well, number one, I just want to thank you for, wow, this journey that you've been on for 6 months. I'm so grateful that you shared that with us, because it is so incredibly important that we look at ourselves and we stop to look at ourselves and really say, what is it that I want? Sounds super simple, but everything that you said, all these processes that you went through on your own, and yes, you had some help with people to speak to, but that work, wow, that's going to accelerate anything that you do moving forward, because the difference is now you're naked, And similar to you, I mean, I have been off since September myself, And I think when you are a doer and you have, similarly to you, I worked for large companies my whole career. And then you come to this point where it's like, it's just you. You're not standing behind a company. Like, who are you? And I want to know, Julia, like, so you're saying, okay, you want to go back and look at which boundaries you need to set. What is the biggest boundary you think you needed to set? What first comes to your mind? And how did you get to that? Because what I've seen in working with people for so many years is that we're blind to a lot of things that we do until we stop, which we hardly ever do. So what was it that really got you to that point where you're just like, listen, this is where I have to start?
I can remember going to acupuncture, and the question is always to start off, so how are you? And my response was, well, work is really busy and I've got this going on and that going on. And the acupuncturist just looked at me and said, do you realize I just asked you how you were doing and you talked about work? And I said, well, yes, of course I did. That work is me. I mean, how work is going is how I'm doing. That is it. I mean, I didn't see anything like, of course, what else is there to talk about? I mean, clearly. And he said, no, he said, and I'm going to give you an analogy. And he said, the one where they say, and I don't know if analogy is the right word for this, but he said, on the airplane, when they say you need to put on your oxygen mask first before you help anyone else, he said, Julia, if you don't start taking care of yourself, you won't be able to do anything at work. And you just won't be able to. So you need to start putting yourself first. Of course, I ignored him. That went in one ear and out the other, because that was back in, I don't know, early 2020, that he made this comment to me. And I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. It literally in one ear and out the other. I was like, yeah, this is how I've gotten to where I'm at today. By being this focused on work. I take vacation. What do you mean? I'm here now. I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing the acupuncture, what have you. But at the end of the day, once I stopped, I realized that I did this. I pushed myself to the edge. I worked 6, 7 days a week. Even when I wasn't at work, I was working. No one put a gun to my head and said, you need to do X, Y, and Z and get it done. That was me. That was me pushing myself because I felt I had something to prove. That was me doing that. And then when I think back on it, when I would think of something, I would text myself or create a list. And I mean at like 3 a.m. I would, I'm not even, I'm like, okay, getting up to, and that was evolving because otherwise it would just weigh on my head. I finally just started, I could type this in my phone. So I would just type myself a to-do list of what I needed to do and blah, blah, blah. And God forbid it was during normal hours. if it were during respectable hours, whether or not I was working or not, I would be emailing my management team or the team to say, oh, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And when I think about it, when I say normal hours, it could be 7 o'clock at night or what have you. I'm doing this. And like, what boundaries was I setting for them? What example
Ooh.
was I setting for my management team? And the words would actually come out of my mouth. Yeah, I work around the clock. I'm not saying that's what you need to do by any means, but that's what I've chosen to do. But because of that, they felt that I set it up in their mind that Julia will work around the clock. That's what I did. So they would reach out to me or not, off the beaten path, and something would click in my head, and I'd be like, "Well, why are they doing that? This is my time." And da, 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 da. And
Interesting.
then I'd be like, okay, we need to have a conversation. My expectation is XYZ, but see, I had set up the boundary.
Yep.
I was not leading by example. I wasn't. And I didn't realize that until I stepped back and said to myself, oh yeah, you did that. Going forward, you need to write a note. Write a
Mhm.
note during a respectable hour, and just the next time you're together, have this conversation. It
Right.
can wait. We're not curing in my line of work. We're not curing any major diseases or any disease.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So that's
That's fantastic. But what I love the most is your accountability as a leader. That came first. Oh my goodness, how are they seeing me? What boundaries am I setting for them? Is I just think fantastic, because most of the time it's like, well, they're not doing this and they're not doing that. And, no, it's, if you're a leader, it's you. It is you. They look up to you. That's part of the responsibility,
mhm.
is people looking up to you. That's what you sign up for as a leader, even though that's not commonplace anymore, that people really take accountability for their people, but that's what it is. And I love that about you, and the way, I think that that's what makes us get fried, is like we are not just thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about how we're going to make things right for everyone.
Exactly.
And that's how we get to that place sometimes of like, oh my God, I'm not even taking care of myself, because I'm thinking about, oh my God, how's this person going to react? How is this going to affect this person? And yeah, it doesn't help to have, or not. What, it depends on the type of support that you're getting. And that's what I think needs to change too, is leaders need support.
Yes. Yes.
Leaders need support. And I love the accountability again that you're showing, because this is how I think we have to look at all of ourselves during it, before we get to that fried and burnout phase, and not being able to, I'm thinking about the business. Doesn't matter how big a business is, sooner or later you're gonna realize, or you'll be made to realize, it's about the people.
Yes. Without a doubt.
It's about the people. And leaders, again, are at the forefront of this, what we're going through right now as a society, of like, you can't just keep going and going and going, because a lot of people are saying now, I'm not I'm not doing it that way anymore. We're all seeing the fallout from go, go, go. So I'm going to start having Janice weigh in here on, what do you speak to? Because you've talked me off a couple of ledges, Janice, when I'm like, oh my God, I need to do this, or I should do that, and the shoulds and blah, 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 when it should be about who are you? Because, and before you start, where I'm coming from is, as Julia, I'm sure is starting to see, when you start knowing yourself and paying attention to yourself, because I think self-care is part of just saying, actually, no, I'm going to take care of me right now. And I'm going to get into me right now. So next, let's start speaking to how we start getting out of that. So Janice, if you have someone who comes to you, kind of like I did, with, I want to do the things, but I need to know who I am to move forward. What's the first step?
Okay, so that's a big question. She did not warm up. She was like, all right, how do you?
We're gonna go bite by bite.
Well,
we're gonna go bite by bite.
No, it's incredible. I think it's, to Julia's point, I think it's so incredible that you've taken the steps to kind of do the inward inspection, like whether it be even the fact that you went to acupuncture, even though, you didn't want to hear the guy chirping in your ear about what, like, you becoming your work. It was like, okay, I'm here, but it's like those self-care things. But it's so funny how there's no, like, the biggest self-care is really putting on that oxygen mask yourself. Like, you could go to the spa, you can get your, like a massage or things like that, but the true self-care is really kind of turning it inwards and taking care of the things that need attention. I think that's huge. So to Sada's question about, if somebody needs to do a little bit of wayfinding in regards to their personal story, or, trying to, especially when you've worked for a company for so long, I feel like those lines blur, and your experience with things are all through the lens of the company or the brand that you work for. It's, how do you take that off? And you're like, all right, like, that hit home so hard when you said, when you no longer work for the company, and you're standing on your own, like, who are you?
That's scary. It's an identity thing. Like,
smokes.
who am I without my job?
I really think, like, I love that you said earlier that you're journaling and kind of asking yourself what makes you happy, and where do you find joy, where do you find calm, what doesn't make your body tense up, and more of like, oh, what am I curious about, what can I spend more time doing, what doesn't feel exhausting, and really what really lights you up. I'm sure as like a leader and being and working with so many people, there's aspects, even though it was grueling work and it was really demanding of you, there's things in that process where it's like, no, I really love helping people elevate themselves to like this next level, or giving them the tools to kind of step up. And like, that's the most rewarding part. You can have that too without all the stress and the angst and, all the other things that come with the pressures of, meeting not requirements, meeting goals, or, certain trajectories that, supervisors or big brands have, like these lofty goals on paper. And you're like, well, actually, if you're in the field and you see what's going on, that may or may not be achievable. It's like you're so tone deaf to what's really happening in the arena, but you're like chirping off somewhere else where it's like, you should be doing this, you should be doing it. It's like, well, are you here?
Exactly.
So I think that's amazing. I think that's kind of how me and Seda started too, was what do you really enjoy doing? Where, like, and she just kept saying, like, it's the people, and it's the forward momentum. And I kind of feel it, like 100% Julia is a doer. Like I feel it in her too, where she keeps saying, okay, what's the next thing? And that's, I feel like, a trajectory and a wheelhouse that everybody gets pulled into of like, okay, I did this thing. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And you think of it as like, even dialing it back, if education or, having a good job or those things were kind of implanted with you at a young age, it was always that then. There was no question you're gonna go to junior high. There's no question you're going to high school, you're going to college, you're gonna get a good job. So it's like check, 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 check. But in what arena do I feel fulfilled, or where do you ever pause and you're like, am I really happy? What makes me happy? It's like, no, it's just got to keep doing the things. So I feel like when you quiet down and you're thinking about, and it's pretty amazing that this is like a 6-month period that you've started this journey and you're coming out of it and you're like, all right, cool. This is like the next thing I'm going to work on. People spend their whole lives going through that. Like what you achieve in like what you were doing in 6 months, like people, it's no small feat. Like people spend their whole life trying to get through that trajectory and like fall short. So I think that mental willingness and the readiness to sit down and ask yourself those really hard questions of like, well, what makes me happy? And it's also to acknowledge like what doesn't make you happy, which on the flip side is like a big deal too, because everyone's like, oh, I can list off all these things that make me happy, but they kind of do the stuff that really doesn't make them happy, but they kind of just do it to do it. But I think leaning in, kind of looking at it from both sides of like being so available, like you said, you kind of set that precedence of people can call me anytime. I'm working all the time. And it's interesting because by definition, the word enough means as much or as many as required. But like who sets that standard? Like, do you feel that you set that standard for yourself? Or is it like an imaginary thing that you think that that's like the standard that other people have set? And you're like, oh yeah, that's what they're asking. But they've never, do you know what I mean? Like, do you think it's a construct of your mind? Or I'm curious to hear both your thoughts. Because I was like, it was so huge. And it was such an incredible thing to share. And I never want you to feel like, oh, it's just like, okay, it's no big deal. It's a big deal, like to verbalize not feeling enough. It's Julia, like that's like, it's such a, I'm like at a loss for words, because I'm like, it's such a huge thing to say out loud. And I guess I'm interested because you guys are so like forward momentum driven, so did you set that standard for yourself? Did like you have a really tough boss one time that set that standard? Like where did your definition of enough come from?
It's that's a very good question, and how you posed it, and who defined what is enough is a very, very good question. I think that being in this body, there are certain expectations that let me take it a step back. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was a sharecropper. And then evolved into being the movie The Help. I used to say, I don't need to see The Help. I don't need to read the book The Help. My grandmother was The Help. And so was my mom when she was in between school. So my grandmother worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make sure that her one and only daughter could go to school. She was going to make sure that her one and only daughter could go go away to university and further her education so that she didn't have to be the help, so that she could be self-reliant. That I was having this conversation with my brother this weekend, and I'm the baby. I have 3 older brothers, but
Wow.
I like to say I'm the oldest. And all of them will tell you I am the most responsible, without a doubt, hands down.
Wow.
If somebody has a question, or my brother, who's 2 years older than me, if he's struggling or has a question, he's coming to me.
Mm.
And so that's first and foremost where that enough came along, because it is, I have to achieve a certain level. I have to be self-reliant, and I am. I am very independent. I could be good to go.
Mm.
And that has its pros and cons, because as a friend said to me after my mom passed away, she said, I know you don't like to reach out for help, but know that I'm here if you ever need any help. And that resonated with me, because I thought to myself, who says I don't? Well, why is that the perception? And I guess it's because I haven't. I handle whatever is thrown at me. I handle it, and then I move on with the emotion part of it, because that's how I was raised. Is that I don't have the luxury of not doing it, and I think society has this picture of strong Black women. And I personify that, as did my grandmother, as did my mother, as did my aunt. My aunt still does, she's living. My Aunt Jo, she's a powerhouse. As is my Aunt Ruby, my Aunt Almeda. All of these women in my life are powerhouse women. They get it done. They've had a lot of trials and tribulations. They've had a lot of tragedy in their life, and I mean real tragedy, not like. And for me, when I think back on what I'm going through, I'm like, sister, that's nothing.
Mm.
What you were living through is nothing in the big scheme of what they lived through. So I think defining enough is it's society determining what's enough. It's me who's determining what's enough. It's my family who's determining what's enough. It's my the workforce who's determining what's enough. I feel like I'm getting it from a lot of different angles. And I'm sure everyone feels that way, without a doubt. I just feel like in this body, there's a lot more pressure that comes along with it, in terms of the
Yeah.
fact that I have to, the expectation is that I will do something 2 or 3 times better, because there can't be any doubt that I'm qualified. There
Mm-hmm.
can't be any doubt. There needs to be above and beyond for me, that I am worthy of that job. There can't be any wishy-washiness about that for me, and for anyone who's in this body. And when I say this body, I mean any person of color. I think we have to be more than enough to do what it is that we do our job. And I think that that's a lot. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a lot of weight. I mean, I won't elaborate because I think Julia said it all. I'm the same way, when we were talking about depression, that's my thing too. Just I'm the first American in my family. That's kind of a big deal, in an immigrant family. Whether anyone says it or not to me, the fact that that is who I am always weighs on me. And my dad always told us growing up, you are Dominican, nobody really knows who we are, but we're going to show them that we work hard and we make things happen. And when your parents say that to you, it is a huge responsibility, because the fact that my dad came to this country and my mom means that, hey, you need to get to the next level. You need to do better than everyone who came before you, which actually is, it feels like both a blessing and a curse sometimes because of the pressure, but at the same time, I also use that to propel me forward, to really say, this is why I'm doing it. This is why, because I have something to prove. But I think what gets lost a little bit is, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of that person, in this body. A person of color will never get to really where they want to be, where there's peace in what you're doing. I believe until you do take care of yourself and you do set those boundaries, for yourself.
Investments come.
I have, other friends, like, of course, I grew up with a lot of other people whose parents were immigrants too, and we're all the same. We all just get the things done, whether they're from Mexico or, most of, obviously, a lot of my friends are Latino, but also Asian. My Asian friends, oh my God, very similar, which is probably why we all became friends, growing up, because we all have this, like, we have to be better. And we can't let them, whoever them is, see that we're, call us lazy or, call us all these other names. We cannot do that. And I think that gives us a lot of pressure. But I think going back to knowing yourself, that's part of knowing yourself and your whys, because bottom line is we're getting all of that from society, but the bottom line is us. And saying, actually, this is the narrative. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is like the narrative, like who's controlling my narrative? Who is? It has to be me. So I think, to answer your question, Janice, I do think we are, with all the conversations about race and about who we are as a society that are coming up now, which I think is fantastic. I think it's fantastic because for someone of color, for me now, having these conversations actually helped me see some of the blocks that I have in my head, some of the stress, where it comes from. So again, I think it all goes back to knowing yourself, what environment you want to be in, professional or personal. Who are the people who are around you that you choose? Because bottom line is we still choose who's around us and how they influence us. But I think that you can't get to that space until you know all your own stuff, all the pretty stuff and the not so pretty stuff, and accept it. And that's part of just saying, hey, this is my reality, and this is how I'm going to move forward with that reality. And a lot of the exercises that Janice and I did in the beginning, and you answered the question perfectly, Janice, because I think, it always starts by, saying, what is my biggest block, maybe, to where I want to be. But how do I know where I want to be if I don't know what the blocks are and what I have to work on? I think that's all part of the process. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was curious too, Julia, you had mentioned like you're putting these lists together and pros and cons and kind of doing the mental work, getting prepared to like, okay, which jobs do I want to apply for, which positions you want to go after, things like that. Seda had this question, or she was like, a couple of conversations previously, she talked about like, oh, sometimes like the feeling of not enough or not being good enough, or like the self-doubt starts to chirp in. And I'm like, have you ever stopped and looked at your resume or stopped and you're like, I am more than qualified for this job because I've done this, I've like can list out like years and years and years of experience. So one of the things that we worked through was you list out kind of all these doubts, because it's like you can't just stifle them. Like you can't just like, oh, ignore them, they don't exist. Like I'm confident every day of the week, every day of the year. Like I think it's meeting it head on. And it's kind of, I think in previous times, like I learned that that's the best way to argue too, is like, all right, you want to, let's talk about what the challenge is and address it so that we can like acknowledge the presence and then move through it. So same thing where it's like, okay, I have these shortcomings, and it's, I think the first and foremost, you really ask yourself, well, is it true? Like, is there truth to that? Like the thing that like the little gremlin that tells you that, whatever the shortcoming is, like, is it really true? Like, how true is this? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how true is this? And then I think take a step back and be like, if I ask somebody who's worked with me or who knows me as like a friend or a family member, how true would that statement be also?
Ooh.
Because 9 times out of 10, that just lives here. It's not like a reality by any means.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost, I don't know if you guys have ever heard that thing of like garden hose or snake, where it's like your mind freaks out that it's like, it's a snake. There's a snake in the garden, and it's really the garden hose. And it's
Love
like,
that.
oh, so it's like a pause to be able to be like, there doesn't have to be this internal dialogue that happens, or this internal critic. I mean, of course, everybody's their own worst critic, but like, how true is it? And how much validity and weight are you going to give to that thing?
Wow. That's great. I love the garden hose thing. I'm going to use that.
But it's true. I mean, and here's the thing too. And I think I love that you guys spoke to, history and ancestry, and how it's almost like if you don't get to burnout, you're an embarrassment, right? Like,
yeah,
you have to get there. Like, and side note, you're not going to call it burnout, and you're not going to be able to cry about it. Like, you gotta, there's no such thing as burnout. You just do it.
Get it together.
Right. But you have to, like, how, like, of course. But I think knowing no different, because that's kind of, those are the examples that we've been given, like in our family lives. And I think that's hard too. I totally get it. Like my mom probably prioritized work over everything. And it's funny, right? It's the females, it's the mothers.
Yes.
Like my mom totally was like, she'll run laps around my dad, but but knowing no different. And but it's interesting now. I mean, my mom's still alive, thankfully. We're able to have sometimes conversations, but it makes her so uncomfortable. Like, even if I ask her, I'm like, well, what makes you happy? And she's like, oh, I'm still working. Like, I like to work. And like, it's, to this day, it's still such an ingrained piece of her identity that there's no separating. And I think that's okay too. Cause like, let's be honest, like my work's my life too. I love, it's not my entire life, but it's a big defining factor. And I think being able to your point, like set those boundaries and be able to take the best of both worlds. So like, something that's been ingrained in us, that's like the work ethic, like the incredible
Yes.
work ethic,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
then having the modern tools of like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
can actually sit down and tell people, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, how they can treat me, or what parameters they have to contact me, and weekends and evenings are off limits. Like,
Yep.
it's just the way it is. Like, and what are they going to say? Like, I had my coach tell me one time where she's like, because I feel always the need to be accessible. Like, I'm like, I'm not a
Mm.
big agency. It is party of one. Like, if we work together, you work with me, and I am
Yeah.
here for you. And she's like, that's great. And like, it's probably why a lot of people work with you, is you're accessible. But isn't it funny, the expectations we set for ourselves, that like, if you had a dentist office,
Right.
would you expect them to be open
Mhm. Mhm.
at 3 a.m. when Julia's sending an email, or 7 p.m. and you're like, okay, are you going to respond? Like, you would not have those. It's so funny how we have these different expectations, but at the end of the day, it's like, no, if it's a business and it's a professional environment, how can you expect that?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's about knowing your value, when going back to where you said, Janice, when you look at your resume, and I still remember when we looked at my resume together, and I'm just like, yeah, my resume. And Janice is like, this is gold. You've done what? And I was like, yeah, no big deal. But it's like, no, know your value.
Mhm.
She helped spin it around to where I was like, I did that. Oh my God, yes, I did do that. Because we don't stop. We don't stop and see how amazing we actually are, and
Mhm.
the great things that we've done. It's so much easier, I know, and we were having a conversation before this too, like, it's so much easier to be like, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm terrible, and they're going to remember all the bad things I did and said, and all that, yuck. But it's hard to, when you're putting so much pressure on yourself, flip it, to then just start thinking positively about
Mhm.
what you've done and what you are going to do in the future. And I think that that's the pivotal moment that we're at right now. And I don't want to completely cut this short, but I'm going to, because this is going to be a two-parter. Because Julia amazingly expressed where she's at. And again, thank you for being so vulnerable, because but I'm grateful to you, because there's so many of us who are in that space right now. And what we want to do next week is take the space where we are right now and start speaking to, where do we want to go next,
Mhm.
and how, which Janice will bring her magic wand and help us to really have a conversation about when you finally get to that space. Again, Julia, 6 months, amazing, fantastic, because it's true. I mean, I think it's a lifelong journey to really get to know yourself, but to do the work that you've done in the last 6 months is just exemplary, to be in that space now where you're just like, all right, I'm ready now. I've gone through the darkness. Where's that little light, and where are we moving to next?
Mhm.
And that's what we want to talk about next week, is how do we do that? Because that's such a big question right now for so many of us. I will include myself in that. I'm always doing self-work, but I'm always, trying to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do next. This is how I want to do it, so that I am happy and I'm not thinking, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Like, I want to get away from that thinking too. That you should. That's, that so many of us have those gremlins in our head. But I think a way to tame the gremlins is, again, doing this type of work of who am I? Where am I going?
Oh, I love that.
Right?
And I think too, it's, to bring it full circle about the burnout and going through the really tough experiences that, like, I feel like plague so many people, but they either stifle it down, or it's you really do go to a point of no return, and it's burnout, and it's like, I'm done, like checking out, I'm done. How incredibly powerful it is being able to do the work and coming out the other end and being like, I have a plethora of options, and if I don't see what I want, I can create something that I want.
Woo!
Really,
Yes.
like, if it's like you're like, oh, I can create a, like, in any space, I guarantee you that you want to be in, there's going to be a need or a demand for it. And I think having the boundaries, even though it's like, oh, you feel like so shut off, like you don't let people in, or you have these walls up for like, I mean, and it's in and of itself, it's like, oh, boundaries sound very like standoffish.
Yes.
But it's so liberating too, to be able to be like, oh, I have these boundaries, so I can keep climbing and elevating myself to like the next level, because I've given myself that space to breathe and to grow and to not have the squirrels eating my roots. Like,
Yes.
I put
Oh
this
my
wall
God.
so I can go,
I can't
so I can
believe
grow
I
upward.
love that. I love that, because I just had a squirrel that I'm fighting with in my garden. Because that's what they do. They kill plants by eating up the roots. And you have to protect yourself from the squirrels.
In other countries, they are cherished. They are
I
just,
do not cherish them
Yeah.
at all, because they come
they
and kill
become
all of
the
my plants.
cute little beings versus the rodents that they are.
Right?
Here in
It's
this
perspective
country, yes.
too. You just gotta find your space. Yeah. It is like, no.
Yeah, this is my personal battle that we won't continue with here. But on that note,
But it's so exciting. It's such an exciting space. Yeah.
Yes, this is a fantastic space, squirrels or not. This is a fantastic space. And I cannot wait until next week when we pick this up and really start doing some work on how we're going to move forward. That's the most exciting thing, is like, yourself, you are just ready to put on those new clothes that fit you perfectly. Of course, I have to come from fashion. It just fits you perfectly and you look amazing because it's you.
Right.
That's what it's all about. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you
so much. I mean, fantastic conversation that we will continue. Of course, the wonderful Janice, our brand pro that really, and I wanted to do this too, because so many people ask me how Janice helped me. And it's something that's actually kind of personal. But with thank you, Julia, again, for joining us for this, because I think together we can really help people see the value that they bring and really be confident in themselves as an individual, and give them some ideas on how to move forward, even after bouts of depression and burnout and all of the things that we're all going through. So please come back next week.
I will.
And we will be here having another fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Thank you for your support to everyone who's listening to us. Thank you for being you and for being here. It's all about you. Thank you so much. Have a great week and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.